They're also struggling with the Volta River, which we're told is gradually drying up. And this situation is not only affecting power production, which all of us across the country benefit from. The livelihoods of many communities along the river remain threatened. And this has been the subject of our latest hotline documentary, Volta Struggles. Joseph Opoku-Gakpo again traveled to some communities in the region where many young men have abandoned a particular village, seeking greener pastures elsewhere because the tributaries of the Volta have dried up. Here are excerpts.
We started growing in the river in the 70s. LAWSON tells me they made efforts to clear them, but they became overwhelmed, and this is the result. They want government to step in with heavy machinery.
We are just praying to God to help us one day, especially to bring to let it be clear to the government to clear off the grasses from the lake for us.
The situation is same in many other communities through which the Volta River used to run. I pay a visit to Mafi Aklamador, another former fishing community. As 70-year-old traditional leader GERSHON KOFI DZISENU explains, the river which used to pass through this community was not only a source of fishing, but also occasionally flooded the lands around the community to help crops develop.
Since the Akosombo Dam was constructed, 1963, by that time I was in middle school Form 2. They dammed the river. That was the last flood we have seen. From that time up to now, there was no flood. So the weeds started growing. Then it has become a complete land now. Though the water is under the grass is so thick that you can walk on it now.
This bridge used to sit over the river, and the entire area you see used to be portions of the water body that no longer exists. More than 10 communities in the area have been affected by the situation. GERSHON says the problem is a major contributory factor to deepening poverty in most communities along the Volta River.
Though we have benefited from the dam some way, in fact we are suffering. The people in the lower Volta are actually suffering because we have lost all our natural resources, which is fish and fertile land. So the poverty level has become so high in our town, this part of town, very, very high. That is why we cannot stay at home. The few who manage to stay here are in complete poverty.
The majority of the population in Mafi Aklamador now consists of mainly children and the elderly. The young people have abandoned the area to go look for alternative sources of livelihood. Assembly member for the area, Godfred Oscar, is worried about the problem.
One thing that we always forget is the mass exodus of our youth from these communities to the urban centers and other busy areas, because there is nothing they can do after their basic education. They usually go to look for greener pastures. So that is one of. So if you come through the communities, you see that it's made up of grown-ups or old ladies and old men living with their granddaughters, and the youth mostly they are away.
Very interesting there, but let's get some more details. Joseph Opoku-Gakpo joins us in the studio, but just to let you know that the documentary airs on the Joy News channel on Multi TV on Sunday at 7:30 p.m. So this village where young men, or should I say young people, don't want to stay, is in Central Town. What's the name of the village?
This is Mafi Aklamador, and that's not the only community. I visited another area, Devime, and a few other communities, and the stories vary from community to community. So the story of Mafi Aklamador, for example, has to do with the contents about the young people leaving, and to them not having any matured young persons there. But in, for example, the Devime community, the teachers they complained to me that a lot of the young people, their parents have left to other areas because they insist that they are fisher folks, so the main source of employment and the skill that they have is fishing. So if the river in that particular area has dried up, then they need to look for another place in order to...
So they leave to find work in the fishing sector, yet they've left their children in a sense unsupervised.
Exactly. And for example, the teachers were telling me about how on some occasions, these children come around, they've not eaten, they don't have money to take care of themselves, and then that becomes a burden on the teachers. They need to, teach them, beyond teaching them, they need to provide food for them, and also help pay for their extra classes and a few other things. So we hear from some of the teachers. That's in Devime, for example.
Right, but in the midst of all this, they certainly have opinion leaders. What steps are being taken to at least try and alleviate these difficulties?
Well, they explain that, for example, when the weeds, well, now they've gone beyond weeds anyway.
There are no more weeds. They actually look like
a whole forest.
Yes.
More like, when they started in the 1970s and mid-60s, they on their own, they made attempts to clear them, which didn't yield much result. So they spoke of how they tried weeding portions of it and all of that. And the basis for this is that initially it used to be a river that used to flow very frequently, but following the construction of the dam, some of those areas, the waters have become stagnant, and that has given the opportunity for the weeds to really develop in it and develop that fast. They tried clearing it, they weren't making much headway with that, and then they left it, and the rest has become of it.
Any possibility of anyone, the authorities, being able to actually clear these weeds on a mass scale?
Yes. The Volta River Authority, for example, has a project, that helps to deal with some of these challenges. They call it the Volta River Dredging Project. So the dredging does not only involve dredging sand from the water body, but also helping clear some of these weeds. In fact, with this particular situation, we spoke to the VRA about it, and they tell us that there's a tender process ongoing to award the contract for a contractor to come in, harvest these weeds and all of that. And in fact, the economic benefits of these particular weeds, the environmental...
How can these economic weeds have benefits when they've actually destroyed people's livelihoods and economic opportunity?
Exactly. The EPA, for example, tells us that they started a project sometime in 2012 in partnership with the African Development Bank, which involved harvesting some of these weeds from the water body, using it to, get compost out of it. They manufacture it into compost in order to use it on the farms and all of that. And these are projects that have been running since 2012, but then the funds ran out, and so then they couldn't continue and all of that. So it's a dicey situation. The growth of the weeds are taking away the main livelihoods, which is fishing activities. But then the assurance from the Volta River Authority, the Environmental Protection Agency, is that some efforts are also ongoing to clear the weeds and use it to provide alternative sources of livelihood for them.
We're in 2016. Any indication of what year that we will actually see some action? Because to be honest, the last time any talk of weeds on the Volta Lake I saw, it was former President Rawlings I saw trying to remove weeds from the Sogakopa area.
Exactly.
I mean, this is totally on a larger scale.
That speaks of how far this goes, because this particular community is quite a distance from the main Sogakopa area, for example. And in fact, the Volta River, the authority tells us that up to 100-kilometer stretch of the Volta River has been affected by this problem. This is actually the worst case scenario. In the full documentary, you will see situations where it's a little better. You see you see real weeds, not forest, in the water body. And even that, the complaint is that once the weeds begin developing in it, then we have situations of the fish in the water running and hiding there, so it's difficult to make a catch. But in terms of real ongoing efforts, the Volta River Authority tells us that with the latest project, which will help with the dredging of the lower Volta, by the end of the year, the work would get underway, because they've gone through the tender process. In fact, I checked on the website of the Public Procurement Authority, and the ad and all of that had actually been put out there. So the expectation is that by the end of the year, the company that will be doing the dredging would actually begin work. But even that, there is absolutely no guarantee that all the 100-kilometer stretch of the Volta River would see work being done. And so some of these communities will continue having this problem for some time to come. And then maybe the option which the traditional leaders there, for example, are calling for, although they think it's not good enough, are alternative sources of livelihood beyond fishing. But they still think that even that is a problem, because they are mainly fishing folks, and they were expecting that just as their forefathers had lived, surviving on fishing, that should have been the scenario. But now they are rethinking that.
All right, thank you very much. And Joseph Opoku Gakpo's documentary Volta Struggles airs on Sunday at 7:30 p.m. on the Joy News channel on Multi TV. But if you're also on radio, you can tune into the Sunday edition, where we'll have a repeat of the documentary, which is already run yesterday. And you're tuned to The Pulse on the Joy News channel on Multi TV. We take a quick break. We'll be right back.